All right, here we go. Welcome in. This is Hawk Talk on Melrose. I am Collin. We are now in the month of May, which means things are starting to slow down just a little bit when it comes to news and topics centered around Iowa football. Yes, we still got the portal, and that's ongoing as Iowa is still looking to add a few more players, and we'll get into that later in this episode. But for the most part, between now and really the middle to end of July, when Big Ten Media Days happens, and then obviously fall camp starts, it gets pretty quiet. But what we're going to do today is we are now 2 weeks removed from the spring game, and I have 5 post-spring football questions for Iowa, and we're just going to talk about it. So we're going to start at number 5. Number 5 is there enough depth on the defensive line? Now, it is pretty wild that this entire offseason, so from like the last game until now, probably 95% of our episodes have centered around the offense, right? Offensive coordinator, Tim Lesser, right? Things like that, the offense in general. Rightfully so, right? That's the biggest question. You know, it's been embarrassing the last how many years. We got to talk about that. Defensively, there really isn't much to talk about because we're returning pretty much everybody besides a few players. And we still got the GOAT defensive coordinator in Phil Parker. What is there really to talk about? Is it going to be as good as last year's defense? That's maybe a topic. And I don't know if we will be. I don't think we will be as good. At last year's defense was really good, but it's still going to be a good defense. I would say, though, the one topic, if there was any topic to talk about, it is the depth on the defensive line, primarily the interior, because defensive end, I'm not too worried about. You got Deontay Gregg and Ethan Herkett, the 2 starters, and then you have Max Llewellyn and Brian Allen, the 2 defensive end backups. I'm not too worried about that. Defensive line, though, I'm a little more worried. You got Yahweh Black, Aaron Graves, and then you got Jeremiah Pittman. Now, yes, with Iowa, it seems like every single year, there's always that 1 or 2 guys that we don't really think much of, and they end up maybe not blowing us away, but like, oh my God, like he's actually pretty good. And so when I say that we only have 3 guys, Yahweh Black, Aaron Graves, and Jeremiah Pittman, that does not mean that we don't got a few other guys that can step up to the plate and be productive and be good for us. I'm not saying that. But for right now, what I'm saying is just experience alone, we really only have 3 guys with good experience. So for me, it's like I don't think it's like a huge importance, but getting maybe and finding a defensive tackle in the portal, someone that has maybe some experience playing, maybe at a lower level even, right, would be huge for us. I know we are looking at it. We've been contacting a few defensive tackles, which means Iowa wants it. I don't think, like I said, it's a huge importance. I don't think the season's over or it's doom and gloom if we don't get one, but it would be a nice addition. But I just think, like I said, when you talk to defense, we got the linebackers, we got the secondary, we got the starters for the defensive line. It's really like the backups, and defensive line. It's so important to have depth there because number one, you got injuries, but they take a lot of snaps, and you get tired really easy when you have the offensive line, big offensive linemen leaning on you all game. You get tired a lot quicker, right? And you're constantly subbing out guys, and you want guys that are coming in that are going to be just as productive as the starters. They might not be as good as the starters, but you want them to be just as productive as the starters. And right now, like I said, experience-wise, we really only have 3 guys on the defensive tackle position. Now, you think about like last year, for example, Logan Lee, who very underrated guy for us. I don't think he gets as much credit as maybe he got. And he was a 6th-round draft pick who got drafted by the Steelers, by the way, last week for a reason. He's a pretty good player. And, you think about like last year, you got a guy like Aaron Graves coming off the bench. I mean, think about that, right? You got Aaron Graves coming off the bench. And then, defensive end, you had a guy who's going to be starting this year in Ethan Herkett. He was coming off the bench for us because we had Joe Evans. So that's where, it's like we got to find a few more players where maybe next year at this time, we say the same thing. We're like, oh my God, that said guy was coming off the bench for us last year. And now he's starting, right? So that is the hope if we don't find anyone in the portal, which I think as of right now, I think that's a long stretch that we will find somebody, just because I think our primary position groups that we need to address is at the wide receiver and the quarterback room, right? So I think those are going to be the 2 most important positions that we get in the portal. And then I think the defensive tackle is just one of those things where it's like, it'd be nice to get. It'd be a nice luxury. It's not really necessarily a huge need, more of just kind of like a want at that point. But That is number 5 for me. Number 4, did offensive line take that next step? Now, I keep saying this, I've said this numerous times on this podcast, that I truthfully do not think the offensive line is as worse or as bad as what people make it out to be. I believe that the offense these last few years, led by Brian Ferentz, the scheme, the predictability, made this offensive line way worse than it actually is. I'm sorry, but when a defense knows exactly what's coming, it's really hard to be a productive offensive line. When you got defenses that are, having 8, 9, 10 guys in the box, you got defenses that are bringing their linebackers up, you got their safeties coming up, you got maybe even a corner because there's no wide receiver out there because you're not spreading teams out. You got a corner coming up, right? It's hard to do anything. And then when you got a quarterback, you think about the last, 4 years, really, actually, even with Stanley, in a way, we've got statue quarterbacks. Petrus and Deacon Hill. Deacon Hill was probably even worse than Petrus when it came to just being a statue. You can't really maneuver around the pocket. And so if there's any bit of pressure, you're done and you're going to get sacked. Meanwhile, most teams have a quarterback that can at least scramble a little bit where you can get out of certain situations and it makes the offensive line not look as bad because you're not getting sacked as much. So I truthfully think the offensive line, yes, does it need to be better? Of course it does. It definitely has not, the last how many years, it definitely has not reflected what Iowa football used to be on the offensive line, which was like the bullies of the Big Ten. 100% not that. But I do think it's not as bad as what people think it is, because I really think the offense, the scheme and everything about it the last how many years did the offensive line absolutely no favors at all. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I do think, though, if we are having the same discussion after next season, and let's say we're like, man, like the offensive line still was not that good, even with a new offense, even with an offense that's maybe a little bit less predictable, which I think it will be under Tim Lester. I don't know. We can talk about, will the offense be better? I don't know. But I do think one thing is for certain. I think there will be a little bit less predictable. I think that's Lester's like number one goal. And that's why you're starting to see the motions and things like that, because that is the biggest thing I think Lester is trying to address. And so if you have that, and then you have the experience, like a lot of these guys, if you think about it, have been in this program now for 2 to 3 years, right? Like Mason Richmond, Jennings Dunker, Logan Jones, these guys have been playing for like 2 to 3 years. So they have the experience. And if we're having the same discussion come next year, I think it's maybe not a bad idea to say, I think we might need a new offensive line coach at this point. If these guys that have been in this program for that many years and have that much starting experience with a new offense and it's still bad or it's still not good, then I think those questions need to start being addressed. But until then, though, if that even happens, like I said, I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But I think, the question, did the offensive line take that next step? I don't know. It's really hard to know. I think during the spring game, they did look better despite not having Jennings Dunker and Logan Jones out there, but it's really hard to really say because you're going up against, your defense, and it's just so hard in practice to know, okay, which group is it, because the offensive line is better and the defense line maybe is not as good, or vice versa. So it's really hard to judge. But I do think, though, I really think new offense, less predictable. I think it's going to help this offense line out a lot. It's going to make them look better. I really do think that. And I think just the experience alone, they should be better. They should take that next step going into next year. Number 3, can Tim Lester shift the narrative for this offense? And what I mean by that is we have been an absolute laughingstock, embarrassing the national media, right? Centered around Iowa's offense. You got random baseball teams, and I think, what was it, North Carolina, that put up like 17 or 18 points, and they tweeted out their final score, and they had to mention Iowa's offense. Like, that is when you hit a new low. And I get it. It's a joke. It's like, who cares? But all I'm saying is that is where we are at with this offense, where you got random people like that, random teams out there that are taking shots on your offense because it's that pathetically bad. So can Leicester shift that narrative? And how do you shift that narrative? Well, number one, we have been like dead last in every single offensive category. You know, you look at like run offense, passing offense, things like that. We have been like dead last. So how do you shift that narrative? Well, just be competent, be average, right? For me, especially this year, this next year, I don't think we're going to go from 0 to 100 in 1 year. I don't think we're going to take that next step, like, you know, from like, wow, we were really bad to now we are really good on offense. For me, like what my goal is we are at least competent. We are average. And what is that? That is like being like 70 or 80th in like total offense and scoring offense, right? Things like that, which is still not even that good, but it's way better than what we were at, right? And if you are at that point, if you are like, let's say right now, you told me we finished like 70th in scoring and total offense, like around there, that's average. That's competent. You can't make fun of that we're kind of dead in the middle, not great, but not bad either. And for me, like, once again, I would love to be top 30 scoring offense, total offense. Is that realistic of me to think that? Probably not. I don't think you just, like I said, you don't just go from where we were at to all of a sudden that good in just 1 year. You know, you look at like most programs that bring in a new head coach, right? It takes a few years, right? And so new offensive coordinator, it's been that bad for so long. It's really hard to just completely take a 180 and just be really good all of a sudden. It's like a gradual step, right? So for me, it's like if this next year we finish somewhere in the middle, 70th-ish, I would be happy. I think most Iowa fans would be happy. And with our defense would be happy too. But I think with our defense, if we finish somewhere around there, we're going to have a damn good season because I think our defense is that good and our special teams are usually that good that you can have a 70th, you know, total and scoring offense or somewhere around there and have a really good football team and a really good football season. So that is where, like, for me, it's like, can Leicester do that? Can Leicester change the narrative where we're not a laughing stock? Because it's, like I said, I know it's all, you know, jokes aside, things like that, but it does get annoying seeing how much, you know, how much people just take shots at our offense outside of like Iowa. And it starts getting a little annoying. It starts getting to the point where it's like, okay, can we do something about this? Like this is stupid. Like it should not be this way. When someone looks at the Tiger Hawk or someone thinks of Iowa football, you automatically think about how big of a joke the offense is. Like I really want to get past that point where we're not just a national embarrassment when it comes to that. And then number two, are there enough bodies at wide receiver? I think as it stands right now, let's say we get no more portal players, which I do think we'll get at least one more at the wide receiver position. But let's say we get no more. You start from the top. You got Caleb Brown, who is poised to have a massive year for Iowa. I think Tim Lester is going to utilize the shit out of him, similar to how he utilized Sky Moore back in 2021 at Western Michigan. Let's face it, Caleb Brown is the most talented, most gifted offensive player that we have. You got to feed him the ball. It drives me absolutely nuts that last year we did not utilize him correctly. Now, we started to towards the back end of the season, but even at that, it was like, we need to feed him more. And I think this year with Lester, he's going to get him the ball. He knows he's our best playmaker. He's going to get him the ball. And like I said, he's going to have a massive year for Iowa. Outside of Caleb Brown, though, it starts getting a little bit more of a question mark. Now, there's potential, but there's more question marks. You start with Seth Anderson. I think I might have said on the last episode, you go back to last year, first game of the year, what was it, the third play or the second play? He gets wide open for a 35, 40-yard touchdown. And then the Iowa State game, although it wasn't a touchdown, if Cade just throws the ball more accurately, he overthrew him. But he was wide open. He did a double move on Iowa State's defender, and he was wide open. It would have been a touchdown. It would have been like an 80-yard touchdown. But, you know, like I said, Cade overthrew him. So what that shows me, like those two plays show me that Seth Anderson is capable of getting separation, and he is athletic enough to get open. And we need that. Similar to Caleb Brown, I think Seth Anderson was not utilized correctly last year either. And that's another thing of just Brian Ferentz and not being able to utilize his playmakers. So for me, it's like, it's hard to know what you have in him because we didn't see much from last year. But I think there is potential there with Seth Anderson. Now, he needs to stay healthy. He was hurt pretty much all of spring ball, which sucks because you want to get him the reps and stuff like that. But I do like what we have in him, but for me, I'm a little bit more cautious with him. And then you have Weege, who Tim Lester loves. So there's something that he sees in him that maybe we don't quite see yet. And so I think he's going to be playing he's going to be playing a lot for us this year. And then you got the two freshmen who are now sophomores, and Dane Howard and Jerry Abui. Can one of those two guys step up and be the man for us? Because one of those two guys, they're going to have to, especially, like I said, if we don't get another portal player. Sounds like both of those guys had really good springs. So can they kind of take that next step as we now enter summer in the fall camp and into the season? And then you have the two guys that are going to be coming in, part of the 2024 class, and KJ Parker and Reese Vanderzee, who I'm really high on. Reese. He's a 6'5", I think he is 6'5" player. He would be a very good X for us. The problem with him, and the problem with like KJ, too, is you can't really expect two guys that are coming in August to be able to just play, a month later. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, both of those guys are probably not going to see the field much this year, but come like next year at this time, I think they could, be part of the rotation. So you kind of have to take those guys out of the equation for this year. So really at that point, you got 5 guys. And that's, like I said, if we don't get any more portal players. For Iowa, that's, maybe a little bit different than most programs, is utilizing the tight ends takes a little bit of pressure off the wide receiver room. And for Iowa, not only A, do we utilize the tight ends, but B, we have really good tight ends, and Luke Lachey, who's going to be an NFL draft pick, and then Addison Ostrenga, who shows the potential. It takes the pressure off a little bit to where the point where it's like, it's not the end of the world if we don't get another wide receiver. Most programs, number one, they don't utilize the tight ends, or number two, they don't have good tight ends where it's a wide receiver room and that's it, right? And so you got to make sure you have a lot of guys there. With Iowa, it's a little bit different. That doesn't mean that I don't want more guys, because you can never have enough wide receivers. You can never have enough playmakers on the outside, but it's one of those things where it's like, we have the tight ends where it's not as big of a priority, not as big of a deal compared to maybe some programs. But with that being said, though, I do want to get at least one more guy. And I thought maybe we would get a guy. What was it? Last week, we got Raylan Sharp, FCS All-American from Missouri State. He visited Iowa. I told Tyler at the time that if he does not commit to Iowa after the visit, similar to what Caleb Brown did with us last year, that he wasn't going to come to Iowa. And why I believe that is because I just think right now you have the ghost of Brian Ferentz still haunting us. And until things turn around, and going back to like my third question, can Tim Lester change the narrative? Until we change and until we prove that, hey, our offense is better. Hey, we get the playmakers, we get the wide receivers the ball more. They're not just guys that are on the outside that run block. We actually throw them the ball. We actually throw a decent amount. We actually throw them their way. Until we do that, until we prove that, it's going to be really hard to land any good wide receivers in the portal. Or even out of high school, it's going to be hard to find really good playmakers, because it's like, why would they want to come to Iowa? So you got a guy like Raylan Sharp, right? So he visits Iowa. He goes down to North Texas. And really the reason why he was even looking at North Texas to begin with is because he's from there. And then he goes to Fresno State. And he visits Fresno State, and he commits shortly after Fresno State. But you think about it. Goes to Fresno State. Obviously for Fresno State, their main priority is, okay, let's get Iowa out of the equation, because they are a Big Ten school. They have, great facilities, great fan base. He'd be playing in front of 70,000 fans. Let's get them out of the equation. And what's their pitch to Raylan Sharp? Why would you want to go to Iowa? I know they have a new offensive coordinator, but I mean, until things change, why would you want to go there? Look at what they have done the last how many years. Their leading receiver, or their leading player that had most receiving yards last year, was a tight end who got hurt halfway through the season. Why would you want to go there? That's like, receivers that go there are going there to die, essentially, because they don't get them the ball, and all you're going to do is run block. Like, that is the pitch that they probably told Raylan. And that's going to be the pitch for most players that are looking at Iowa from other schools. And so going back to what I said before, I thought if he doesn't commit to Iowa after the visit, we're not going to get him, because you're going to have those two schools saying those type of things. And until things change, right, and we're a more respectable offense and we actually get the wide receivers the ball more, that's going to keep happening. Because think about it. Think about if this offense the last how many years have been going back to like being competent, right? And actually not being dog shit and actually throwing the ball to the wide receivers and getting them involved. What does Fresno State have against us, right? Like what are the cons? There really isn't any. It's a Big Ten school. You're great fan support. You're going to be playing in the Big Ten. You're going to be playing a lot of national televised games in front of 70,000 fans and things like that. I mean, like what are the cons? Especially if we get the ball to the wide receivers. And so until that happens, man, like I said, it's the ghost of Brian Ferentz that's going to haunt us until we turn things around, because guys are going to look at us and be like, yeah, no, I'm not going there. You look at all the stuff on social media making fun of Iowa. You don't think these players see that? You don't think those players hear about how crappy and really bad the offense is? And until we get that turned around, it's one of those things where it's going to be tough. So who do you think will get then at wide receiver? So right now we're really focusing on Eli Green from North Dakota State, which would be a massive get for us. I think even a bigger get than Raylan Sharp. Problem with him, though, is there's a lot of schools that are targeting him. And once again, going back to like the Raylan Sharp situation, a lot of these schools are going to be like, why would you want to go to Iowa? Right. I think Iowa State might be the move for him just because his former offensive coordinator is now at Iowa State. I think he's the associate head coach / running backs coach, but you have that connection there. Plus with Iowa State, and it kind of showed last year that they're kind of an air raid-ish type team. Not saying they are, but they threw the ball a lot last year, and you got a proven quarterback. And so there's really not much you can say about that, right? Like they throw the ball to the wide receivers. They have a proven quarterback. So I just think it's going to be tough to convince them to come to Iowa, but that would be a massive get for Iowa. I think what Iowa's going to end up getting is someone that's not really proven, maybe a lower level guy. I know we were looking at a guy from like Chattanooga who had like 300, 400 yards, a guy that, just provide some depth, may play a little bit. And I think that's what we're ultimately going to get. I wouldn't be mad about it. I know where we're at. I'm not expecting us to find a really good wide receiver because like I said, it's going to take time. It's going to take until we turn things around to really get anybody to even consider us moving forward. And finally, number one, the quarterback room, reason to panic. I do think that there is a little bit of a reason to panic if we don't get anybody. But I do think, similar to the wide receiver room, I do think we will land somebody. And I keep saying this, Tyler and I keep saying it, that we can't just find somebody just to be like, okay, we found a quarterback and now we got 4 quarterbacks on the team. No, you got to find a quarterback that can compete against Cade and that can, potentially start. And if he doesn't start, you at least feel good that, okay, he's the backup. So right now, as it stands, we got Cade, we got Marco, and we got James Azar, who's coming in August, which you can't expect him to be able to just pick things up that quickly and be like, okay, maybe he can start for us. Like that's not going to happen. He's not going to start as a true freshman. So you really have Cade and Marco. Sounds like, according to David Eicholt, and I'm recording this on Saturday, May 4th, that Brendan Sullivan from Northwestern is on campus. Now, I have not got he has not confirmed if he's on a visit. He just said he's heard he is in Iowa City on a visit, but like I said, he has not confirmed it. Let's hope that is the case, and let's hope we get Brendan Sullivan. Is he the best quarterback out there? No. Well, maybe in the portal, yes, for Iowa, but is he the best quarterback that we could get? No, but he'd be a nice pickup for Iowa. He would be the perfect kind of match for Iowa. Going back to last year, Brendan Sullivan, he did not start for Northwestern, but he did play in, let's see here. He really played in 4 legit games. He started, I think, in 4 games. And then he played, a couple, in garbage time at the beginning of the year against Rutgers, Duke, and Penn State. But like I said, he did play in Howard, at Nebraska, Maryland, and then versus Iowa. Had a really, really good game against Maryland. Was 16 for 23, 265 yards, 2 touchdowns, and was completed 70% of his passes. And then he ran for 56 yards in that game. The game following that, he played Iowa, and he didn't play very good. But what quarterback does play good against Iowa's defense, right? So I think he'd be a good get. His season stats for last year, like I said, he only played in essentially 4 games, 714 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. His QBR was 44, and his completion percentage was 64%. I would take that. And not only that, but he can run the football. He's not a great runner, but he can run the football. And you go back to watch that Maryland game, which I did this morning. There was a few times where they did like a read option and he kept the football and he got, a decent amount of yards. So he can definitely run the football. He'd be, like I said, he'd be a big get for us. He would compete against Cade. And it'd be one of those things that if Cade beat him out, Cade beats him out, but at least we know we have someone in him that just in case Cade gets hurt, we have Brendan Sullivan. Or, what if Brendan Sullivan comes in and he beats out Cade? I'm sure Cade wouldn't be very happy about it, but then you have someone like Cade coming off the bench for us. So I think it'd be a massive get for Iowa. I think if we got Sullivan, and let's hope he commits after this visit, if he's even on this visit, let's hope he is. But if he does commit, there's no reason to panic anymore. I think we are good then. We got Cade, we got Brendan, we got Marco, and you got James Lazar coming in. I think that's a good quarterback room at that point, and I think we're things are looking a lot better. Then at that point, let's just find another wide receiver, and maybe getting Brendan Sullivan. Not going to, maybe you'd be able to find a wide receiver a little bit easier because you can pitch that guy. Hey, obviously Cade's been hurt, but hey, we got Brendan Sullivan who's played in the Big Ten. He has starting experience. And we got him as well. So we got 2 quarterbacks that are capable of running an offense and being productive. So, anything can happen like that. So like I said, it'd be a huge get for us. Is he the best out there? Is he the best ever? Absolutely not. But I will take anything and really anything at this point. I just want someone, like I said, that can come in and that can compete with Cade and potentially get the starting job. And if not, be a really good backup. And I think he would be the perfect player for that. So we will end it there. Tyler and I will probably be back here in the next week or two. Hopefully by then we do get a commit, in the wide receiver room and the quarterback room. Like I said, I'm really hoping, I'm crossing my fingers on Brendan Sullivan. I think he'd be a big get for us. I think he would fit perfectly in our quarterback room. And so we'll probably do a podcast if that happens or if we get somebody else, and we'll just go from there. So we will end it there. Thank you guys all for listening. You guys have a good rest of your weekend and great week ahead, and go Hawks.